Welcome to Christian Authors Community. We are authors helping authors. We get together once a week and have a roundtable discussion about how we can use our platforms to further the spread of the gospel of Jesus Christ. If you want to learn more about what we do or how to join us, head on over to our website at authorscommunity.net. Let's jump into today's meeting.
So today, Kim and I were going to just maybe reiterate a little bit of last week, and I have just a bit of new information for you. I think Phil might have asked for some of this, or we mentioned it. And then on legal issues that come up with writing nonfiction. And then we can just open it for question and answers and discussion. And Kim, do you want me to just start with this new info, or do you want to reiterate first?
No, you start, because I kind of said what I need to say last week, so go ahead.
Okay.
Kim, I saw your answer to my question already.
Okay. Good.
Okay. And I think Phil, somehow it might have come up with you. I'm not sure now, but we were talking at the end about like release forms for authors to use to obtain permission to use names in their books or photos. And so there are quite a few out there. One that I looked at for a client I have was called signnow.com. But that one, as well as some others, at least the way I saw it, was when you went in to use it, you got a free week, 7 days. I'm gonna have to close this window here. And then after that, it was a paid program. And I didn't go into that, so I don't know what happens after that. But in that one, signnow.com, I found an actual author's release form to send to whoever they wish to get their permission. There's another one now that client didn't like that site, and he decided to use the thing called airslate.com. And I don't really know anything about these, but I know they provide forms. Some of them you have to purchase. Some you like create an account and ongoing. Now he started that one because he thought in his business, he's an insurance salesman, that he could probably use that account further for other things in his business than just for this. Now I know in signnow.com, it's electronic. I think you can also print out a form, but if you wanted to send it to somebody, they could electronically sign. In his case, he has people in Hawaii that he was requesting their permission, so he could send that electronically, I think from AirSlate as well. But when I went to look this up initially, and this is where you can find a lot of information, I just typed in author release forms, and it came up author release form templates, and there were tons of them. And I know they're not all free, and there were templates for most anything you could think of, but within those, you can find something that works for authors as well. I think one that came up when I typed in that was pdffiller.com, and it gave many, many, many types of release forms, and so did templatelab.com. Are you familiar with any of those, Landon?
Not that I can recall, no.
Okay, they're not familiar to me either, and I've not ever had to use one, but this gentleman did, and so we went searching. Like I said, he landed with airslate.com. And really last night I looked again. You type in author release forms and you're going to get pages and pages of what I saw for all kinds of release forms, including author ones. Do you know of any, Michelle?
I don't, because when I first started my business, I started it with LegalZoom to set up my DBA, my doing business as, and they had access for the first month or two for free to all of their lawyers. And so I pulled off a whole bunch of forms that they had and tweaked them to work for my business, and then had a lawyer look at them. So that's what I've always used.
I was going to say, when I was looking at these, there are ones you could tweak, you know, to work for yourself. But like you did, you might want to check with a lawyer to make sure. But I don't know how many of you here have come across needing that kind of thing, excuse me, or might need one. But as I said before, this gentleman I'm working with, he must have 100 or more names, and he's got at least half of them that don't want to be named even though there is nothing derogatory being said about them. They just don't want to be named. And so he is, in some cases, he's just changing the names to fictional names. Well, in all those cases, he's got to change them to fictional names or just take them out. There was a section where he was trying to name the mom, the dad, the brother, the sister, the sister, the sister. And I said, why don't we just say father, mother, brothers, and sisters? You don't have to worry about their exact names. And that worked great. I mean, you don't always have to use names. But for those who are fine with him using their names or even showing their picture, which he is inserting quite a few pictures, he is getting their permission. And some he feels don't even require a form, but I told him it's probably a good idea if you have them sign it. But there are many, many, many forms out there, and you probably would just have to find the one that suits you best. It was in signnow.com that I found one that looked pretty simple for authors to use. But like I said, it was an account you had to sign up for. I mean, I just used it for that 1 minute. I mean, that short amount of time to show my client, and then I just went out of it. I didn't go into the paid program or anything. So, and they didn't start paying they didn't start charging after 1 week automatically. I actually would have had to sign up for it. So you might watch that though, because if you get into some of those, you know how they are. You get a free week or month, and then they automatically charge you. But if you haven't given them a way to charge you, then that's not going to happen. And this did not happen that way. I did get a lot of emails from them to answer or let them know I just passed it on to somebody else. But that's what I found on that. That's my take on that. If you have any comments or questions on that.
So you have to forgive me because I missed last week's meeting, but
Sure.
that was in reference to people using real names in books, like getting permission to use those details.
Yes. Specifically, like if you're writing memoir or tell all type of stories. And we sort of discussed two ways, like you can write nonfiction and tell your stories not using any names. You have to be more vague or change names and settings, or just don't use those at all. I was telling last week that in one of mine, it's not a whole book, it's a story. I use no name of the state, no name of the city, no names of any people, no specific situations that would make someone else look bad or bring them into it. I mean, if they read it themselves, they might understand what's being said, but a stranger reading the book would not. They would get my part of the story, but they wouldn't get all of that. And then like the client I have, he's telling a story, basically memoir, that is just including tons of people. And he wants to include them, but he's finding out not everybody wants to be. So, I mean, Kim had some like 5 or 6 different areas she listed last week where you can get into trouble. Defamation of character. I wrote those down, Kim.
Copyright infringement.
Right of publicity violation, breach of contract, trademark infringement.
Right.
You know, I was thinking more along names and photos, but those other things play into it as well. So I guess in certain circumstances, you really do have to be careful because somebody could come back on you and haunt you or sue you. Don't want that.
So just, I don't want to deter from your guys's presentation or
Sure,
other things that you're going to talk about. Just kind of thinking about ideas for the new community and things like that. Would it be a valuable addition, or would it be too much of a liability, I guess, if we had if we seeked out some sort of legal advice on some form templates or standardized sort of forms like that we could put into the resource library to offer people, like, this is your standard, non-disclosure form. This is your standard permission form to allow me to use your name and all the details in the book, like some sort of those generic things. Would that be of value to the community?
I like that idea.
There probably would be an update issue.
Explain more.
As always.
What do you mean?
Go ahead, Phil.
No, well, just to pick up on your update issue, as soon as you put something in writing, especially material like that, the way the laws change and the ways that people come up with doing things, it can change overnight sometimes, and you have to keep up with that. Otherwise, the document becomes basically useless.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say that I like that idea, Landon, and I'm wondering if we can have a discussion or some paperwork on an authorpreneur type setup. There's things called S-corps, which I think a lot of internet marketers use. Is that something that, as a writer, I don't know, we want to get 1 or 2 books out of our system maybe, but some of us might want to do it as publishers, or to just produce a series of books on their own with some kind of a legal protection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
I used to set up corporations for people. I'm not an attorney, but I mean, I would set up mostly nonprofits. But I know that I'm an LLC. But I mean, I think that's something everybody has to determine whether you want to do that, or that's worth that to do that. I mean, you can operate as a sole proprietorship.
So you think providing? That's okay. So, like, providing some of those documents, you think would be too much of a liability for us?
I think providing links would be safer.
Yeah.
Just because of the update issue. I mean, well, or links would be safer because of the update issues. I mean, like with mine, I did what Michelle did basically. With the publishing forms and with these permission forms, and I still have Matt, my attorney, look at them, every so often, just to say, hey, So I think that would be our issue, Landon, is how much are we going to update it? I think it's a great thing to offer people, but how much are we going to update it? Will we be better to link to where Nancy's talking about?
So then I would maybe go back to you guys on that. Like, how often have you had your legal documents updated?
About every year and a half.
But is that just reviewing, or is that them actually going in and look at it and saying, oh, you need to update this or add this?
It's been both. I only do it when I need a specific document and I haven't used it for a while. So it's been both. If he needs to add something in there, then he does that. If not, it's just like a little fee for him to look at my paperwork. So that's, so for me, it's been both, because sometimes it doesn't need it. You're fine, so.
Michelle, have you ever had to go back and update yours for any reason?
I haven't had anybody look at them again. They're pretty broad in the way that mine are written, that I think that I'm covered. And I've had them for years, but I've never had an attorney look at them again. I probably should.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't want to hijack the discussion, but just try and get ideas for valuable things to provide maybe to the community. We can talk about that a little more in depth.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. So, I know some of you, I've heard this said, not just in this group, but otherwise, if you're a fiction writer, excuse me, I've often heard it said, oh, I wouldn't know how to begin to write nonfiction. I can't even imagine writing nonfiction. And I was on the other side, a nonfiction writer, thinking, oh, I wouldn't even know how to begin to write fiction and put all that together. I did cross over, and some of you may have too, but there are other types of nonfiction. So I wouldn't want to scare you away from writing nonfiction altogether, because not every nonfiction is the type where you're involving people and having to get their permission. I mean, you can write nonfiction, inspirational stories of, whatever occurred, maybe that doesn't even involve names or people it's just a random story. So I just say that to say, don't ever get scared away from nonfiction because of this type of thing, because it only applies in certain types of nonfiction writing. Would you agree with that, Kim?
I think that's true. I think my concern in nonfiction is though that, you know, it's so, well, I'll tell you, even as a fiction writer, basing, you know, Mimosa Lake on a rural lake neighborhood, people are like, I'm in that book, you know, kind of thing. Got a disclaimer there. We talked about the disclaimers at the front of the book last week. But I think another thing where you can kind of bleed out and get, I mean, you're looking at places, you're looking at businesses. I mean, it's just really an awareness factor. And yeah, I wouldn't want to discourage people from writing nonfiction. I've published a lot of nonfiction for people. But I think you just really need to be aware, especially if, Walter, are you here? Is Walter here still? No, okay. Okay. Well, I'm just going to say I'm working on a book for Walter that's a very intense story. He's using a lot of places and a lot of businesses and things, and we've talked about this. You know, will it affect, will where you're using and the people that you're putting in there, will that truly affect the story? And then I know what we talked about last week. I think I'm freezing you guys. I'm sorry. What we talked about last week is the collateral damage for the innocents that are bystanders, somebody's sister, somebody's mother, somebody's father that you're using in a story. I think, of course, you can go ahead and use, but you have to really just be aware of the risk, and that, you know, we are a litigious society, you know. So it's probably all fine, like we spoke on last week, if you've got your little book and you sell it to 100 people or whatever. But I don't know. John, I have a question for John. Do you have anything that occurs like this? Like if you're asked to illustrate a certain place or a certain, I mean, does this occur in illustration as well?
I usually ask whoever I'm working with to get clearance on their end. It's their book. You know, if they have a specific picture, and they want to use it in there, you know, they have to contact whoever has it to get that clearance to use it, or permission, or pay for it, or whatever. You know, from the artist's point of view, it's a little bit different than the use of words. I mean, I can take a photograph and I can alter it to the point where it's not recognizable as that photograph again, and I can get away with that. So it's nothing I'd like to do or anything, and I always ask permission first, but it's something artists are a little more flexible with. So, but I do ask the authors to, you know, specifically if they have a photo, you know, to clear that with whoever owns it. But I can alter it.
Yeah. So,
you know, Landon, maybe it would be good, the place where we had some of those disclaimers on Mighty Networks that, you know, Kim mentioned several last week, disclaimers for fiction, nonfiction, and there were several that you brought up, Kim. Maybe those disclaimers could be listed and used. I don't know.
Oh, the disclaimers on front of my books, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could work on those. Maybe we should talk about that in advisory and see. And you guys, we would like, you know, I mean, want to know what everybody says. Yeah. And yeah, I hate to just discourage somebody from writing nonfiction. Remember, if it's factual, you're covered. I think my issue is I don't want to be drugged through court if I don't have to be. You know, I mean, I don't think anybody does really. You know,
it's not. And I want to be. Kim, it's not going to be a court issue right away, I think, unless it's a really intense topic. But you know, you're going to get an attorney's going to send you a cease and desist first, probably. You know,
yeah.
But that can be costly, especially if you've invested in the publication of a book, and it turns out you have to stop selling it. That could be expensive.
But even with the cease and desist, we don't have total control of you know, how all that's going all the time. You know what I'm saying? So you can get a cease and desist and get a time frame on it, and then you've still got stuff out there. How do you control that? I don't know how you control that. And I haven't talked to my attorney about this, to be honest with you, so I don't know, John. I don't know
Cease
the
and
process.
desist just basically tells you to stop doing what you're doing. Otherwise,
What you're
it could
doing.
lead to a court issue. So that's what I'm saying.
Right.
It can be expensive if you don't, cover your tracks and get permissions for certain things. This could cost you down the road.
Right, right.
You'd have to stop. If you get a cease and desist, you have to stop or fight it, one or the other.
Or fight it is right, yeah. And you probably won't get that unless, your book is really, your story is really taken off, because then there's money in it for people. So,
Yeah, the bottom line is money. Yeah.
The bottom line always is money. Yeah. So, but yeah, those disclaimers that I've got, yeah, we can share those. That's no big deal to me.
For myself, when I needed disclaimers, I just looked in all my books, picked a few, and then kind of copied it or made it my own from those. That's one way. But go ahead, Landon. I interrupted you.
No, I was just going to say that Eileen's had her hand up for a while.
I'm sorry, Ellen.
I was just wondering if you were writing historical, nonfiction. You might have a different way of viewing historical events or people, so which might upset some other people. So I'm just wondering where you stand with that.
100 years or more, you're safe. You're pretty safe.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
And Kim, didn't you have a disclaimer that mentioned like this is the author's memory of the event, or that kind of thing?
Yeah, I can read it. Do you guys remember the disclaimers? I can read them. Hold on. Let's see, where are those disclaimers? Yeah, it's the author's intent and. Yeah. Oh yeah, they're in my books, I think. Here's a simple one. Unless otherwise indicated, all the names, characters, businesses, places, events, and incidents in this book are either product of the author's imagination or used in a fictitious manner. This is a fiction one. In a resemblance to actual persons living or dead or actual events is purely coincidental. Yeah, this is the one I use for my nephews. And, I don't think we really talked a lot about, but it really became an issue for me. I hadn't thought of it before last year when I was taking stuff off of Facebook posts and using them in this book of Matt's. Whoops, sorry. There we are. But I thought about that because I thought, and I don't have an answer to that. I never talked to Matt, my attorney, about that. But I realized that once you post in Facebook, it is considered public domain for lack of another, but could you get in any issue with the platform? And I didn't know that. I still don't know that answer. Okay, so here's the publisher's note on Matt's book, the disclaimer. Publisher's note, the contents of this book were created from the contributing author's memories and imagination. All names, places, characters, and incidents either are a product of the contributing author's imaginations or are public domain. The reader should not consider this book anything other than a work of literature. Some of the works in this collection may have been previously published and have since modified from initial publication. All photographs and or letters are used with the permission of the photographer and or submitting writer. Each contributor retains all rights to their work within. And then the editor's note is, in order to leave the submitter's voice, grammar, spelling, and word usage intact, the submissions in this book were largely left unedited. That's probably for this book more because it was Matt's friends who, in my opinion, there were words misspelled and all that. I'm leaving all that. So
you should be okay, Kim. I would think you'd be okay as long as you acknowledge those parties, like you just said.
Yeah, and so then what I did was, here's in this book. Then I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Then here's the listing. There's like 2 or 3 pages of the listing of all the contributors in order of their appearance. Okay, so that everybody has, and it's just in order of appearance so that nobody thought, oh, I'm the mother, I'm the this, I'm the that, kind of thing. So that's what I did. So yeah, you acknowledge all the contributors. Yeah. And I think I told you guys everybody got a free book, and then they had to sign a release that said, I don't want payment for this book. I know the proceeds are going to for this cause, that I accept I know that I'm offered a free copy of the book, but I agree that my work is, but that's a special thing for that book, so. But I've done quite a few anthologies, and for a cause, some cause or another, writers group or a hospice or MAT or something, and that's just a pretty standard. People don't mind signing those releases if they're contributing usually, Did that answer your question, Nancy? That's some disclaimers. There are a lot of disclaimers. A publishers group that I'm a part of has some good disclaimers too that we could look at. So, it's just a matter of being, I'm thinking about everyone's perspective as you write your book, so. Have we turned you all off to ever writing another book? Hey, Trace, what's up?
To go along with something you just said, the client I'm working with wants to give 10% to this yoga studio. It pertains pretty heavily throughout his book, but he's getting permission from them, to say that and to do that. But he was asking me a question like, would that be okay? Basically, if somebody knows, you see this in books, this profits from this are going to whatever organization. And I told him, as long as you're saying that organization is all right with it, a person buying your book will either say cool, or they'll say, oh, I don't want anything of mine to go to that organization, so they might not buy your book. But I think that's pretty rare.
Well, the other thing is you need to say a percentage or some of the profits or something like that, because if you take any amount back for publishing the book to even make it to ground zero, then they're like, now wait, you're selling this book for this cause, and so I always say a percentage of the profits go to that, so you're safe. But yeah, that's right. I guess I could say like some of mine go to animal organizations, and they could say I don't want that to happen or whatever. So, hey, Teresa had a question. Your microphone, Teresa.
Okay, I'm doing a book called Back in the Day, back for 50s and 60s, and I was growing up. The way I'm handling that in the introduction, I'm putting that I have changed, and I will not be using names or places where all these events took place, because I do not want to embarrass anyone or any of their family members. That's how I'm handling it. I'm talking about back in the day. I'm not going to use people's names. I'm going to say the church I grew up in, or amusement park that our group always went to, like that, without naming names. That's how I'm going to get around that one. I'm going to be talking about how issues are different today than how, back in the 50s and 60s, we didn't have any of that to deal with. Just compare of how it was when I was growing up, because things were different back then, and a whole lot than they are today. And there are things going on today that back in my day, it just would not have been allowed. And so this way I can get around it by not mentioning the place or mentioning any names, and that way I can get around it.
Yeah, and you're walking that fine line of, you want the story to be told, you want to have the impact, okay? So how can you do that in a way in the safest manner? How can you do that so that you kind of walk that fine line of, maybe you need to be speaking about a certain person in order to understand that impacts that character, that person, fiction, nonfiction, impacts the story. So then you're making a decision there. So then how are you going to, you know, to work that? So the safest way I always think too is to try to be as broad as you can, but you can't totally, like Nancy was saying earlier, you can't totally whitewash the story so much that you're not going to have, it doesn't have the impact because you're too fearful of using this person or that person or whatever, you know. So it's just be wise, which we all are here, you know.
Well, that's where using different names can come in handy, you know, because otherwise, how do you refer to that person? The person that did this, and you're saying the person that did this all the way through the book. That just becomes very clunky, you know. So, yeah, changing names.
But if they have a relationship, with you that's important to the story.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
You know, then that becomes more of an issue of how are you going to work with that within that framework, because it might be that how their relationship is a major impact on the story. You know, what the relationship with you and their behavior, you know, so.
It's a lot of work, you know, to get the release forms and to figure all of that out, but it does take a lot of thinking and thought to do it the way we're talking about right now, the way Tess is doing it. Because, I mean, you can talk about, you know, a certain place and not give its exact name. I mean, you can say the fairgrounds without saying the name of the fairgrounds, that type of thing, or the camp, giving the name of the camp. I mean, I really had to think long and hard when I wrote a couple of particular stories because I was going about them that way. I had no intention of trying to put names or even change names. So it takes a lot of thought and energy. That was a tough one for me, but it was worth the effort. I mean, hopefully it turned out all right, but it's hard in a different way than getting all the release forms and the permissions and dealing with people that way and changing names. It's two different ways. They both have their tough spots.
And I think that I might give you an example of what they were talking about as far as, you know, using facts and seeing if you can get documentation to back up what you're saying so that what you're saying is actually you know, it's a world of facts that you're operating in. And I'll give you an example of mine that I could have from my own life. I've never written about it, but I was assaulted at work several years ago by a man. And so there were, you know, police reports and legal things that happened and on and on and on. So I have, should I ever choose to write about that, I would go get that information. I would have that. Now I might not name the person, but I might name the place where it was, you know, but I have some court documents, which is one of the things they were talking about. You have some legal documentation, you know, that's considered fact. And so, yes, that's my story, you know, but it's just safer to, you know, if you can do some research up front. You know, our research we're talking about now up front in a nonfiction is kind of how we all feel about marketing in a way, except Alyssa, who is like the world's greatest researcher I've ever met, Alyssa Allen. But you know, people don't want to do the research, but think about the story and think about what happened and think about, you know, how you can cover yourself is really the bottom line, you know. So
and yourself sick, because even if the story is true, you know, you may not want to ruffle the feathers of that person.
Right.
So
yeah, that's true too. So
were you talking someone? I'm sorry.
Alyssa was just commenting back.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Teresa, did you have something to say?
I was thinking a lot of it is about me. A lot of the stories are about what, you know, I don't know how to explain it, you know, but it's about just different things that events I was at and I'm just observing that how the, the behavior, and different things, were different and alike. One example is when at that growing up, we always did the Star Spangled Banner, and we did the pledge at the beginning of the day, and we always prayed. The school principal would come on what we called the intercon, and would and just things like that, because I'm using a lot of myself in the story. So, and anybody I'm using, they're all dead. Even a lot of the relatives are dead, and a lot of cousins on my dad's side, a lot of them I haven't seen in years. I don't even know where they live anymore, and a lot of them, I understand, have died off. So I don't know how I'd go to the family and get permission on my dad's side. There's 13 kids, but there's very few cousins left because a lot of them died over the years, with, in different ways.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it doesn't sound like you're really defaming people. That, it doesn't sound that way. What you're, if you're writing books on stories and you're not really very, very negative, I mean, and I don't mean negative, but I mean, basically you have to watch for defamation, so that's where you get into the problems. Usually, though, was it you, Nancy, who said that your person was complimentary of some people and they didn't want to be in the book?
Oh, my client, yeah. I mean, there's really nobody he's defaming in the book, but they don't want the parts that include them. They don't want their name told in that. And one is a brother of his who is a priest, and he's just like, I don't want to be in there. I don't want my name in there. You put me in there, and I'm going to come after you, basically. So he just changed his name and changed the story a little bit. But no, I mean, really, I can't think of anybody of all the people he's named, including 2 ex-wives, that he's defaming. So, but he's being careful.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah. Herman, you didn't have this. I haven't read your book. Did you have any of this in your book at all or not?
Yeah, I don't name them, but so for each chapter, I have a story. Sometimes I tell the story and give their names if they're okay with it. So some of the stories are, I have some contributors, people I've mentored who wrote their own story, and it's in the book using their own names and everything else. So, but it's given me some depth in knowledge of the industry. So I will do some legal checkings just in case.
Yeah.
Thank you for. I was.
Oh, no problem. I just wondered if you had if you'd run across this in writing this, because I know that yours is nonfiction too. So, anybody else?
Really kind of boils down to that particular book, I think, and that particular story. There's so many variations.
Right. Yeah. And really, really think about like Teresa, you were saying, these people are dead, that I understand all that, but think about collaterally children and, this is important, I mean, not from a legal perspective as much as just, is the story you're telling and the way that you have to tell it worth the, look at what that impact is going to possibly be, so. And you guys, I'd put a disclaimer. I put a disclaimer at the beginning of every single book that I publish or write, fiction, nonfiction. Yeah. Go ahead, John. Or was it Phil?
I was just going to say, it just means everybody's going to have to write fiction. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my kind of question here. Can you decide, tell me, is a memoir fiction or nonfiction?
Being nonfiction.
Well, isn't it a blend?
Yeah, that's
Isn't
what
it
I'm
a
thinking.
blend?
I've been
Because
reading that.
when you're talking about a memoir, you're not talking about a specific, you're talking about someone's impression of their life, their incident, their whatever. More than, I mean, isn't it both in a sense? It's what I read in the disclaimer. It's the author's imagination and, you know, that's what I think anyway. What do you guys think?
This is nonfiction that I'm writing. It's things actually happen because what I'm doing is through, you know, as I was a child, you know, a particular Christmas, maybe a particular Sunday before Christmas, you know, things that happen, maybe gratitude, you know, shown, and just comparing it with the day. Then I'm not really criticizing the day at the end of each chapter and just writing, you know, would things be better off? You know, ask a question. Would things be better off if parents discipline their kids more? Would things be better off? Or would they be worse? You know, and then make the person think about it instead of clarification. Make them think about it.
Maybe a memoir is soft nonfiction, Phil.
Whatever that is, yeah. No, I read that when memoir, even though it's a memoir based upon true facts, it should be couched as an intriguing story. And if that's the case, then where does that fit it? As fiction or nonfiction, or like you said, Kim, is it a blend? That it still has to be categorized somehow, though.
I always thought it was under nonfiction, but you know, the person telling the story, as your disclaimer said, they're telling it from their point of view, from their experience and how it affected them. So maybe in some ways it would deviate from true actual reality, but who could say, you know?
You could have to.
It's reality told as a story.
Cynthia has a question that Cynthia says, what about fictionalizing a true story? And I can't see the rest of that. And can you do that with a disclaimer? You know, I haven't published anything like that, but I did write a short story that is totally based on fact, but I wrote it with different names and I made it half and half. And I didn't publish it, but I did put it up, I think, on Goodreads in the creative writing section. I read it once at our local authors group, and that's a good question because it's so much based on fact, but I did change it somewhat to fictionalize it. And so if I did publish that in a book, I personally would definitely have a disclaimer. I have a disclaimer in my books. You know, you can say, see books say based on a true story.
I wrote a story called 2 Blocks Home that won several awards, and it was about my dad and my brother. And I didn't get it because I was writing it I didn't get any, you know, signed anything, you know, and I didn't think they'd care what I wrote and, you know, all that kind of stuff, which I think my dad always cares, but basically my brother was, you know, suddenly interested. But then it won some awards and it got in some places, and then it was like, oh, what is this that you wrote about us, kind of thing, you know? So I mean, that's a difficult thing to even. That's a good point, because what do you do with like a short story? Say you're entering contests, which is kind of fun, you know. Maybe we do some of those at some point in time in the community, that some kind of, you know, get you award-winning author, blah blah blah, you know. Anyway, so say you do something like that, and you do have a short story. I don't know how far you take something like that. I really don't know. What do you guys think?
I have my manuscript is based on a true event. However, the place and the characters are all fictional. So even though it's based on something that did happen, everything else is fictional. And I would definitely use a disclaimer because, you know, it's my interpretation of everything, but it is fiction.
I would say this is a little bit deviating, but I would say if you're going to write some of these kind of things, I would really encourage you to explore the legal contract, or contract for the lack of a better term, going to the person or the people that you're going to write about and getting them to legally sign off on that, rather than just falling back on some sort of a disclaimer in your book. Because the reason I say that is, obviously I'm not a lawyer or anything, but a simple disclaimer in your book, I don't think is going to hold up in court, because just precedents like disclaimers on software things, or when you sign up for things or whatever, those haven't held up in court traditionally very well for a piece of software that you sign your life away when you click the I agree button. But then they go and do something nefarious with your data, and then people turn around and sue them. Like, those disclaimers don't really hold up very well. It's not a blanket, I can write whatever I want and be a little obfuscated about some of the details and then be free from a lawsuit or a libel suit or something like that. So I would just throw that out there with everybody, kind of saying, put a disclaimer in your book. Not that I think that that's a bad idea, but don't fall back on that to protect yourself legally, I would say.
Yeah, we did talk about that last week, Landon, because there's we talked about releases not only from the individuals who are used, but also releases for photographs or any specific information that you're getting that might be, something of theirs that would infringe on their rights. But yeah, getting a release from people signed before you ever put the person's name in the book. Mm-hmm. I don't know how you get a release for a true event. I don't think you would. I mean, there's no way you can do it. Who's in charge? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and when I say that,
but he's absolutely right.
Okay, yeah. And when I say true event, I mean, it's not like the whole book isn't based around this event. The event has triggered the book. Is basically so it's a trigger. It's more, this event happened, 20 years ago. It just kind of triggers why the story is now written.
It's a catalyst, but yeah, right. So it's not a major, so.
Yeah.
But I think that, no, you're absolutely, we can't rely only on disclaimers. You really need a signature. And I know that there's, I sign electronic forms and documents all the time that are legal, and not all the time, but sometimes. Landon, I like printed copies of all of that in a file with the information. And we've talked about this before as far as our own copyrights. You keep everything so that you have, you can show in court that, but basically you keep all of that. So I guess I'm asking you, Landon, what do you think about electronically signed? Wouldn't you print a copy of that down? I mean, I would.
So again, not a lawyer, but I think that digital signatures are generally accepted as actual signatures, and they're just as good, or they hold up just as well in court. And it really comes down to like your document storage techniques. Like, if you don't really have a good way of storing digital documents and making sure that you can keep them, indefinitely or for at least 10 or 15 years, and you think a printed copy, is something that would be easier for you to stick in a folder and keep it for that long, then by all means do that. But I think if you have a way to store digitally, that sort of document holds up just as well in any sort of court. And then if you're really paranoid, then do both.
Paranoid?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, paranoid. John's paranoid too. Yeah.
I'm old-fashioned. I rely on paper because digital can disappear. I like paper as long as I can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
both. Print out a copy and then store a copy on your Dropbox or Google Drive or whatever other storage you want. Both have pros and cons. All that stuff could go up in flames in a house fire, however unlikely. Or, you put your sensitive data on the cloud and your password is password 123. Then, someone can break in and steal that information. So just be careful either way.
What are you saying, Alyssa?
I was just commenting on the intention to enter legal agreements online. There are some software that make it very plain to both signers that by signing the document on that system, your intention is to create a legally binding agreement that holds up in court. So if you sign to it, then you can't then get to back out and say, oh, I had no such intention.
I'd like to add something if I could.
Sure.
Sure. In my book, there's subjects I'm staying away from. I'm not even going to discuss. I'm staying away from gender, marriage, abortion, guns, and riots. None of that will be in my book. Because, the purpose as an author, you put the book out there, but at the same time, we don't want to offend people, because if we offend people, they're not going to want to buy our books. That's the bottom line. We want to do our books in a way that we're gentle with what we're saying. At the same time, we want people to buy our books. That's one reason I'm staying away from certain topics. I'm not even going to cover them. I don't want to get involved in covering them in any way.
It's not a fun topic, is it really? All this stuff you have to think about, You start creating a book and you get so excited and then it's like, oh boy. But it's just the way it is.
We may know it all, but we don't know what we don't know.
We know that we don't know it all. That's basically, that's exactly right. Landon, about your idea, I think that we should, maybe you guys can put some input in through chat or through Mighty Network about what you think about us trying to develop, even if it's a reference library for something for people to look at with disclaimers and forms, that kind of thing. We'd have to say that we're not, I don't know how we deal with that, but we'd figure out our own disclaimer probably for that. But
put a disclaimer on our disclaimers.
Put a disclaimer on our disclaimers. Yeah, but just for reference for people.
Anything else? Nope.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.
See you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Next week, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If this topic has helped you out in any way, we'd love for you to take just a second and leave us a comment or leave us a thumbs up on the video. It really goes a long way in helping us and helping the YouTube algorithm know that this is valuable content and to share it to other people. If you want to learn more about Christian Authors Community, we would encourage you to visit our website at authorscommunity.net. We hope that you guys have a wonderful day.